Today we're checking out all of the games from the Haunted PS1's Catch Ideas Like Fish, David Lynch Game Jam, hosted by friend of the pod, Amosori of Moya Horror. For those watching who didn't participate or are otherwise unaware, it was a game jam that ran from January 4th, 2026 to March 7th, 2026, where participants were encouraged to make games inspired by David Lynch without directly recreating or adapting his works. Focused on capturing a Lynchian tone and atmosphere, something dreamy, uneasy, invites interpretation, reflection, and leaves the player with a lingering mystery. I attempted to participate in this jam myself, a sequel to my last HPS1 jam, Bonefire Effigy, out on Steam, but the dream's demands kind of blew up in scope and I crashed out hard in February, as is my custom. So as penance, I'm checking out every game. They'll be presented in the order I played them. It usually presents jams in a list of popularity from most views to least. I always try to start from the bottom of these lists, just in case I don't have the stamina to see them all. That way the folk at the bottom at least get one set of eyes. For now, let's take a look at the dreams. New Apartment by Gigi Row. Took a while for the game to pick up. At first I was getting some Lynchian vibes with the phone calls. The way they seemed so detached from you. But it quickly felt like it was running through the same dialogue over and over, and my answers didn't seem to change anything, so I don't even really remember what started the journey properly. I think it was the move-in papers. That does end up being the core loop of the game, finding a piece of paper, giving it to the man at the end of the hall, and then finding the next one. There are some other small chores to do, replace a fuse, throw away your garbage, but this mostly seems to be used to do a room-swapping puzzle for finding pieces of paper. Eventually, you will pick up the phone, and it'll say you can hang up, and then the game shuts down. I spent about 30 minutes with the game, but that felt really dragged out between not really knowing how to progress and the long walks down the hallway. A shorter hall or faster walking speed would have been nice. I also feel the music that you could hear through this door being more present throughout the building would have added to the vibes. The controls were a little unwieldy for me, as Q and E were for swapping items and F was for interacting, and I'm just so accustomed to E being an interact button. I did like how the hand sort of reaches out to tell you when something is interactable. It was a fun diegetic way to do that, though I wish it was a bit more obvious. It was annoying you couldn't cancel the smoking action once you started, so once you start smoking you're locked in for the long duration, often causing you to miss a call. Also, if you miss a call, the game tells you missed a call every time, and I was sort of hoping there would be a consequence, like a monster something, but no. Best I can tell, the phone and receipts are trying to infer we were in an accident, and someone is trying to reach us in this liminal space, coma, dream. I don't know. It was really hard to read the text on the pieces of paper. Oh, this little photo of a woman was interesting when I noticed it. Was that always there? And this dress too. I think the experience could be tightened up, but I did enjoy my time with it overall. Average Playground by Peter Februar. A platformer that starts with you in an average playground. I played around for a bit, going up a ladder, down a slide, and was about to quit out of fear there wasn't anything more to see when suddenly the slide became super long and transported me to an underground lair. Roaming around, I found 2 regular cheeseburgers that gave me upgrades in my movement. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to find any place to use them, so I go back the way I came, which leads to a ladder back up to the playground where I can now reach that rung up in the tree, only to discover there is a bowl of quinoa inside. That ends the game. I try again, thankfully keeping the powers, but I only find this Easter egg and nothing more. The game touts that there's a bunch of endings, but unfortunately I just was unable to find any more of them. And what I did find, I wouldn't really call Lynchian, but it's an okay platformer. Echo Emporium by Grizzly Bee Games. A demo, an RPG Maker game, and a bit of a mess in this state, but if you can look past all that, you get a fantastic little piece of fiction. You play Layla, who enters a random shop in an attempt to escape the howling voices tucked in the wind. Inside, you lose your sense of self and are tasked with finding items that match your self-image. Each item literally speaks to you, giving you a brief overview of this facet of Layla. She holds doubts about each item being a perfect match. The writing's flavor does a good job of bouncing between voices, each character and facet getting their own. The music adds a lot to the mood as well. Unfortunately, my game crashed about 15 minutes in, and I didn't want to do it all over again, so I just left it. but I feel the game really captures a Lynchian mood. My only complaint outside of the crash is the intrusive thought text is a little fast. I often missed what it said. Hopefully when the full release comes, it'll be more stable, but I'd be interested to play through the complete game when it drops. Gallery of Dreams. Egoblip's first game, a gallery full of little experiments learning how to use Godot. I would have liked the walking speed to be a little faster, or maybe add a run button just so I felt like I could move at my own pace. The slow walking speed actually deterred me from covering every inch of the gallery. Still, what I saw was neat. Lots of interesting little exhibits that build up this particular mood. It's always cool to see someone's first steps into game development, and I hope we continue to see more from Egoblip in future game jams. Where the Road Folds by Talon. Listening to a man slurp up coffee and eat quinoa is not my idea of a great time, but when you're not doing that, the game is great. Very cinematic. It's very short, but tight. You get some exposition from a mysterious third party, then grab your coffee, go home, eat, sleep, dream of a man who gets really mad, wake up, grab your coffee, go home, eat, turn on the radio, slowly walk towards a horse. The end. It's a bit reductive to say it like that, as what the game excels at is the mood, the atmosphere, the intangible stuff you could only really get by being there. My favorite part is the shot where you're walking towards the horse. Felt super Lynchian. T.W.I.R.L by Genie Boy Games. Openly inspired by PT, this game sees you walking down what mechanically could be described as a hallway, though due to the open floor plan of the home, feels more like a bridge. Over and over and over again, the game has you gingerly walk down this stretch to your sister's room for something seemingly nefarious. The game's primary strength is its narrative, not spelling things out, giving your mind a little time to wander about the nature of these visits. There is a lot of voice acting, most of which does a good job at selling the emotions of each scene. The highlight is probably the parents fighting.
We can fix him or get help or...
No.
There has to be someone you can talk to.
No! What's sick is that you didn't notice something after all of these years.
The game's biggest weakness is its attempts at horror. The monster, in the heaviest air quotes money can buy, she's just a girl, and is sort of just thrown in your face every loop. The worst aspect is the lack of variety. Every time you enter your sister's room, you get jumped, respawn a few feet back, and then go again for everything to be fine. At first I thought the game was introducing a challenge each night, like don't look at your sister, or keep your eyes on her, but after so many nights, I'm pretty sure it's just first entrance equals death, second one's fine. It's a game that's inspired by PT, but perhaps didn't understand the importance of the 90-degree angle and the natural suspense that creates with each loop being a surprise. Wondering what'll be around each corner, and that it's equally important to let it be nothing just as much as it is to let it be a figure standing there menacingly. The game almost creates that with this bathroom detour where you have to take a left turn, but as mentioned, it's never used to threaten the player, only kill them briefly. The most effective mechanic in the game is the QTEs that the game has you do in your sister's closet. Well, one of them. The game has you hold the left and right mouse button and then make small circles, which felt very suggestive to something sexual without being explicit. When your sister catches you and says you're going to go to hell for doing such things, it evoked being caught masturbating in your sister's room like some freak pervert. Putting the player in the sexual deviant headspace as the thing our protagonist is doing wrong is great. When the protagonist is caught proper, everyone starts treating them as if they had been masturbating to their sister for all these years. One of my favorite things the game does is this sort of sketched line work. It's on the monster always, and it's fine there, but it's the strongest when it's used on the environment. I also like the cat's eyes always being bright and that you could pet them. I was kind of shocked to see when the credits rolled that 17 people worked on this game. During the ending, you're giving a choice between two doors, and the visual language suggests that you're picking to be normal, or what the game has taught you to associate these sketched lines with, being a girl. The text over each doesn't help you know what choice you're making, and so when I chose the door that I thought was the protagonist accepting this part of themselves, it was actually the bad ending where they kill themselves and burn in hell, which is a really disappointing end to a game that was otherwise sympathetic with this character. There was a chapter select that unlocked at the post-credits, but I didn't think to check if the other door was an alternate ending before I closed the game. And when I loaded it back up, the chapter select is missing. Personally, I think chapter selects should just be unlocked from the word go, it would have helped stave off what was the scariest thing that happened to me, which was the fatal crash. Luckily, I was only a few loops deep when it crashed, but it did have me on edge the rest of the game that every loop could be my last. T.W.I.R.L is a dark game, and I mean that in a quite literal sense. There is this brightness setting, and the game tells you to make the left barely visible, but if you do that, the whole game is pitch black. I found the game was in a playable state with the brightness all the way up. All in all, while I feel the game leaves a lot of potential on the table, it's a fantastic first attempt by Genie Boy and the crew. I'll be excited to see what they do next. The weakest aspect of T.W.I.R.L is its gameplay, but that's something they should get better at with more attempts. For Loved Women by Yana 3 River. The game focuses on a character recounting the 4 women they murdered, maybe? Unfortunately, I was unable to complete this, as 2 runs I did both got thwarted by the 4th woman breaking the game. The loop has the narrative give you a hint where the victim should have hid to avoid death, and if you pick wrong, it says found, and if you pick right, it just moves on. The story was interesting enough. I wanted to know how it ends. It's just a shame it's busted at the time of playing. I like the art style too. Something about this style of model and texture work speaks to me. Spruce Falls Act 1 by T.W.I.R.L. A quaint little investigation game. Local journalist has been squashed by a tree outside of a diner full of high schoolers. One of them takes it upon themselves to investigate while the real detective is disposed. The writing is charming. I enjoy T.W.I.R.'s character style, and the location is comfy. It's one of those games where you talk to everybody, gather up key phrases, and then try to use those key phrases to unlock new key phrases. Unfortunately, instead of trying to deduce what key phrase would lead to new possible outcomes, the game ends up devolving into me just hammering everybody with every key phrase until something happens. Then the mystery was over almost as soon as it began. There are a lot of narrative threads to be tugged on for future acts. The person who was murdered was a journalist attempting to uncover a corruption scandal, and the people who maybe did the murder are tree-loving hippies, and a local cryptid is just out there terrorizing people. Making a good detective game is hard. It's difficult to test your player's knowledge without handing them the answer on a silver platter. I'm not even really sure how one would go about making the investigation part of this game more engaging without it becoming frustrating or adding a lot more complexity and development cost. Either way, I do think the game holds enough charm that a bigger location with more clues to discover and more suspects to speak to would be worth revisiting. The Right Proper Time by Flynn's Creations. Very bare bones, basically 4 screens, a cabin, the woods, a dead horse by a bowl of quinoa, and this other dead thing. No flavor text to read, just the visuals and the sound of rain. Also, you can't return home once you leave. You're lost in the woods forever. Not a lot to chew on, but as always, it is an achievement to upload something for the jam. I mean, it's more than I did. Diagonal Path by Apix. Cute little demo where you find videotapes that transport you to new locations. Took me a long while to figure out how to sleep though, as when there is no tape in the TV, the protagonist will tell you they can't sleep without noise, and the action is grayed out. When you do put a tape in though, and are facing the TV, the world it transports you to partially phases over the space. When you go to the bed and press sleep, nothing happens because you're meant to hold it down. I suppose I'm just not really sure why sleep needs to be a hold down action when everything else is a single press. I spent a majority of my time with this demo just trying to figure out what it wanted. The controls are somehow unwieldy as well. E interacts and F examines, and I think it was just having a dedicated examine button that threw me off. Most games would just have an action button that does whatever it needs to contextually, or would bring up a menu when you press the interact button. The game doesn't have a full screen function, and that was a little unfortunate. Should be an easy fix though if they decide to pursue this idea further. The atmosphere and art direction are pleasant, and the mechanic of using tapes to influence your dreams to go to new places is fun. I'm curious to see where it all goes. Prognosis by Grim Jim Games. I had a very similar experience with their last game from Advent 5. They have a lot of cool ideas, but when you play it, it all falls apart into this frustrating mess. If I hadn't seen a video of someone else playing it to completion, I would have wondered how it released in this state, as in my build, the dialogue system was broken. Whenever it came up, you'd have to move the option with the arrow key to activate it, but then it wouldn't move again, so you were locked to the second option. This is fine for most of the game, as the options don't really matter and you progress regardless, but there are a few instances where the second option sends you into a loop, and then it's game over. This happened twice, and after that I was done. I'm frustrated about all this because the interactions you have with the characters have a good dreamy quality to them. Like I say at the top, there's a lot of cool things here, it's just mired in technical bugs with no clear issue. If I didn't have that other video, I would have thought this game just needed more polish and suggest that they ask for playtesters in the server, which, to be fair, everyone should get in the habit of doing, because having fresh eyes and a different rig play your game can unlock so many issues that you're blind to. But with that other video, maybe the issue simply is that there is a component of Grimjim's process that is incompatible with my rig for some reason, and so it's just a me problem. LABBARINTH by Scumgut Games. This is a pretty alright little demo. You wander around a cave, it does the thing where you have a camera that sees stuff that you don't. You meet some ghosts, maybe you talk to them, but in the end, you shoot them dead. Sometimes the devil tries to spook you, but then you spook him with bullets. There is one time that is scripted and you can't kill him, but that's so that you can talk to yourself and then kill yourself. You also meet a weird blue ghost that might be a conversation of people watching over your comatose body, inferring this is all a psychological descent, not just a physical one. Unfortunately, I got stuck in this crevice. It's just like real cave diving. Honestly, the only reason it was unfortunate is because the ending was literally 10 feet down the alternate route. So I played this twice just to get a thanks for playing the demo. Wagering that hole in the full game would actually let me drop into the next zone, as there are plenty of holes to drop down for speedrunning. The battery mechanic, I'm not super fond of. It keeps draining when you talk to ghosts. So while I did talk to everybody in my first run, I just shot everyone dead on my second to save battery. When the battery dies, your real vision goes black, but not the screen, which doesn't make sense, but is the scarier option, as the camera vision lags about a second behind reality. Overall, solid. Hermano Hussle by Studio Leia. A brief game about how every match could be your last. You go in, bet on who you think will win. I only ever bet on myself because I'm foolish. The first 2 times I win, and the third time, I lose. You bet all your money every match, so when you lose it all. Then a horse tells you to stop chasing for a better tomorrow and make the most of today. Roll credits. If you try to play again, the game doesn't reset your money, and you're too broke to bet, and so you're shot on sight. I enjoyed the vibes of The Office. The toilets really tie the room together. The actual combat is limited, basically a punch and a block, but the first 2 guys you can mash punch to beat, and the third one is so big that his fist reaches you before you can reach him. A fine little game. I would have liked to have seen if there's more past the third guy, but that's life. The Third Place by Henry Faber. A shoot 'em up, where you fly and shoot your head at things. And stuff? And a possum says David Lynch quotes until you meet the cow horse boy, where I think you're supposed to not fire. The girl does a shush with her hand, and so I don't fire to be quiet, and then a heart appears, I shoot it, and I get a game over. Unclear if that was an ending or a death. It's not the hardest shmup. The cameras only being vulnerable while looking at you, but also shooting a million bullets was a little tiresome, as you just sort of had to luck out that your head passed them on re-entry. It seems a bit more referential than inspired, but putting that aside, it's a decent entry. Portents of the Dreamer by Eva Codes. Dead silent. Some ambient music would have been nice. But as for the game, basically you're trying to find items to give to locations to increase their power. You want the town's total power to exceed the goal, 45, within the time limit, 10 days. It's a very trial and error affair, partially by design, as many of the rewards the game gives is hints on how to maximize your power. As some locations get double points if you use the right item, but there is also a combo system that encourages you to make your moves in big sweeps rather than instantly. You start the game with 4 items. The mug is the most powerful, as sending it to Town Hall gets you a mug of coffee. But the odds of you doing that without being told by the horse that gives you the quinoa if you trigger dreams on the train station is very slim. Triggering the dreams, which, to clarify, means giving location an item and then passing time. At the town hall gives you a multiple choice option for reward. They're all knowledge based, one telling you that beauty items are worth double at town hall. On the 7th day, the train station will be filled with many mugs. And finally, if you long rest, a book will appear in town hall. Oh yeah, you could travel to all the locations to check for items, but outside this cat that gives you a nail file, I couldn't find any spawn items outside what the town hall mentions in their hints. Visiting a location will pass time, but it won't turn the day over. There are also hidden locations inside the 2 locations. At the port, you need to put something inside this box, and at the mines, well, I never figured out the mines. Maybe when the mine box tells you that it wants metal, it's speaking about the mine interior and not the exterior, but I never tried, I guess. Yada yada. It took me about 30 minutes to solve the puzzle and get enough power to get a win state. The game is a little obtuse, but I'd say that's the charm. I enjoyed solving the puzzle. As One Does by Ryan Klein. I enjoyed the simple task of just finding some stuff and then getting a little treat minigame with each item. One sees you building a vine to reach the exit. Not a lot of pressure, though the goal wasn't clear at first, so I went straight up only to discover there's a top, and then I had to shimmy my way back down. The second had me on a horse, mowing the lawn. At first I was going efficient one row at a time, but that was kind of boring, so I started Tokyo drifting the horse, even though it made it take longer. The third was probably the weakest, as you just move to the right circle and then catch a fish. The rest are empty. I found the right one on the first try, but I didn't wait long enough in the circle, I guess, for it to count, so I did a lap around the empties looking for an exit, only to discover on my second round in the fish hole that the game would despawn me as soon as "you caught the fish" animation ended. Then you leave the grocery store. Speaking of, that's probably the silliest thing about the game. The store is fully stocked and crashes out the frame rate when you look in that direction. It's wild. Also, weird things, spacebar pushes you a little forward, so instead of a sprint, I was kind of bunny hopping around everywhere. It's a fun story about daydreaming at your job, nothing too deep or complex. I'm not sure if I'd call it Lynchian, but it was certainly dreamy. Signal Catcher by Substand Shrimp. A simple adventure game about fixing your TV. The pre-rendered backgrounds are a nice touch, even if sometimes the bounds aren't perfectly matched. Very straightforward. Gotta grab your orb, grab your keys, talk to a man, get him some coffee, go to the facility, grab some files, give them to the man, break into a church, avoid some monsters, grab a Pip-Boy, blow up some monsters, get the antenna, the end. The part of the game that took the longest was finding the coffee because of how wide open that map is, where most of the screens are only as big as what fits. Avoiding monsters was a little tight in some spots. Thought I broke the game here for a minute as I was out of bounds, but he'd still get me before I got to the door. Luckily, I was out of bounds enough that if I didn't rush the door, his collider wouldn't hit me, and since it seems they have a set path, I was able to slip by. The pre-rendered backgrounds are doing a lot of the heavy lifting to this game's charm and style. They're great, and again, for a little game jam, this is perfect. The Place Between by Mr. Clapp. The Place Between is kind of another PT clone in the broadest sense that you continue to loop in the same location over and over again. Although this game gives you real chores to accomplish in each loop. Find a key to unlock a box that you also have to find to open a gate to the next loop. Each loop gets darker and darker until in the pitch black of night you enter a maze. There the narrative takes off and becomes heavy-handed. The game does a pretty good job of building tension up on this red car. While there is some disappointment that it never becomes hostile, sometimes it's best to promise a scare that never comes. All around are beers and cars, cars and beers, what could it mean? It's a drunk driving story, though to the game's credit, it's not about a man tormenting himself about a drunk driving accident he committed, but if the disembodied voice of not a real person's things that are to come are to be believed, that this is a fear of a trauma that he would commit should he drive home after day drinking in the park. Luckily, he sleeps it off and then goes home in the morning. Overall, it's a good entry. Like I said, I think it's a bit heavy-handed with the story towards the end. Not as much room for interpretation as you might like, but it's a good entry. The Antique Store by Sarah No. Oh, this one is special. There is very little interactivity. You were given some dialogue choices, but they're just two ways of saying the same thing. While I do put a lot of weight in real life conversations and deliberate word choice and how subtle differences can completely change the message of a statement, my gut says that in this game, the choices matter little. We play an antique shop owner, selling the wares that they and their family have collected over the years. There really isn't a lot to explain. Most of what makes this title stand out is the mood, the imagery, and the specific dialogues and how it all makes you feel. It's not explicit with what it's trying to say, and I think that's why this game has felt the most Lynchian so far, because underneath the shroud of its imagery, you can feel the shape of a thing that it's trying to say. If you're watching this video for recommendations of what you should check out from this jam, I recommend this one. If you're watching to hear my interpretation, well, our protagonist owns this shop selling pieces of their life and culture from back home to make a living. Customers keep complaining about a smell, and the final one, someone who also ran a shop in the past, mentions a noise that only we can hear, and knowingly what the smell is. Perhaps a little textbook Lynch, but I'd wager it's meant to act as a dichotomy of the pleasant face against the protagonist's own soul decaying. The front-facing facade of the shop is presentable. Our interactions with customers, even as they make outlandish requests for us to remain open on a holiday because we have no family in this country to spend it with, or that we stay open late because someone forgot their money, or when they're asked to sell something that holds a significant meaning, the customer's always right. These interactions nickel and dime at our shopkeep. They miss home, they're not happy here, but this is the life they've chosen: the smell, the noise, the negative feelings that can't be hidden. The game has this repetition as we go day by day through this life, just a glimpse at the monotony. I love that the game isn't afraid to just make us sit in it, waiting. Between days, we watch our protagonist slowly walk to their shop. Usually normal, slow, boring, but there's this one day where the sky is on fire, and it feels like we're on the threshold of hell. The final customer acts as a ray of hope. They clearly no longer own that shop, but seem to be doing fine enough that they can afford these antiques, so perhaps our protagonist can one day get out from this hell of their own making. I don't know, maybe I'm way off base with the author's intent, but that's what Lynch loved about art, how it encourages the audience to dream. Insomnia by Mion. A mildly unpleasant experience. The soundscape hurt my ears, and despite being put into full screen, the game remained pixel perfect and small in the window, making text extremely difficult to read. And that's more or less all you're doing here, is reading. You have the titular insomnia. Can only sleep with pills, so you take them, and then the Hat Man comes, yells at you, gives you a key to the dream world where you're tasked with fixing a clock so you can know when to wake up. You help 3 entities with various things they want, most of which is in this book, and the other is next to the book. Once you have all 3 hands of the clock, a door opens up and the Hat Man tells you it's time to wake up, and you do. I have bad eyes, and reading a lot of small text is strenuous, so I skipped a lot of the optional dialogue, and while I skimmed the book for details that might be helpful, the game just kind of tells you when you find what you need. There is some postulating that the nature of insomnia isn't a fear of sleep, but the fear of waking up from a dream, but that you can't dream forever, you need reality to orient yourself, a sort of yin and yang, you can't have light without the dark talk. Unfortunately, the strain of my eyes and ears made me fly through this one really quickly. City Ants by Lunar Finch. A brief little 2-minute excursion, but they do a lot in that time. Basically no gameplay but make the text progress. I really enjoyed the way the exterior shots of the city changed between each interaction. A circle, a drain, a mess. The interaction between an old man with a light ball for a head and the quinoa plant, very ant-centric. I enjoyed the ride, but maybe it was a little too brief. I don't feel like I really absorbed what the game wanted to express other than a very broad, people are like ants. The city, an ant's nest. Ants' nests are like people. Heart-Shaped Hauntings by Magpuppy. The heavy use of post-effects was very effective in an analog horror way. The game is just scene after scene after scene of tiny scraps of information that slowly build up into a narrative in your own head. A lot of it is text, some of it 3D environments. You cycle through 4 times, each time unlocking something new. A phone call that goes nowhere, a knife that lets you slip into a new scene. Certainly a lot of it left open for interpretation. I suppose the core of it is trauma given by someone trusted, and now that they're gone, there's only the void to give these feelings to. With enough time, even the shape of them no longer appears in our dreams. While I spent a lot of the game thinking it could be a lover, some of the imagery, especially the final shot before the game over, made a parent seem far more likely. Also, the way the phone call goes nowhere is what makes me think that it's a parent that is no longer around. The portrait the words painted had me thinking on sexual assault for much of the game, but with how vague it all is, it certainly doesn't have to be about that. Any failure or betrayal could lead to this sort of spiral. It's a great entry. Crawling by Goblin Warlock. I'd seen a lot of whips of this in the Haunted PS1 server. I was a little worried that the game was going to be an invisible monster wandering around that you had to avoid and could only see through the viewfinder. I'm not generally fond of persistent stalkers in games. I find them more frustrating than scary. Turns out the game is more of a puzzle game where the monster is static and you just have to know where it is and then dispatch it with the flash. It's a little annoying how the Death Collider doesn't disappear as soon as the monster does. So if you flash them and then move too fast, the game will send you back to spawn anyway. It made the game take a lot longer and ended up being a little frustrating. The you can only look through the viewfinder for so long mechanic was also annoying and frustrating, as you're discouraged from having it out, but that also means you might bump into the monster. Both result in you getting sent back to spawn, which does nothing but waste your time, as you have to walk all the way back to where you were and try again. The static nature of the beast left it feeling very unthreatening. Sure, look at the faces in the stills and they're unsettling, but since the thing is shifting, you don't actually see any of them. I think there is a lot of potential in a world swapping mechanic like Soul Reaver, where you need to switch between states to solve puzzles. Obviously, the designer should follow their own heart. Maybe they have plans that will make their decisions make more sense in a complete game. But based on what I saw, I'd remove the viewfinder timer, make it so that you aren't killed by monsters you can't see, but maybe add like different monsters in both realities. If the creatures are to act like blockages, having like a bulb switch mechanic so that you need to use the right flash color on the right creature could act like different colored keys. It's a well-crafted entry, the environment is well put together, and I like how dingy it is. And the 2D artwork is strong. Mostly seen in a monster, but there are some portraits around that I forgot to get footage of because I accidentally missed the record button my first time going through, and so I had to run through it a second time to get the footage. Of Geese and Flowers by Structure. What a strange, anticlimactic adventure. You, Goose, are tasked with finding flowers for your ward activity. You wander the woods, and that leads you to a desert, and then the ocean, some guy's house, a city, and then finally back home in the woods. The journey is said to have taken 2 months, and in that time, activity has moved on from the idea. The end. Visually, it's great. Gameplay-wise, you're led by pages that tell your story with an omniscient narrator. They lead you from plant to plant, then you pluck the plant, which spawns a portal to the next area. The flow of the narrative is really fun. It almost feels like a fairy tale of sorts. Maybe the logic could be described as dreamlike, and maybe that's where the Lynch is supposed to come in. I don't know. Overall, I enjoyed it, even if the ending was, again, anticlimactic. Scattered Wings by Jacob Marks. I've played a lot of games that are text-heavy in my day, and the decision to have you move the car mirror left and right to trigger the next part of the conversation was inspired. It seems so small, but I'm just so accustomed to pressing the interact key for progression that the small act of ping-ponging a mirror between our characters was really engaging and endeared me to the game almost instantly. Not to mention how stylishly it was done. I even enjoyed what little there was past that. The game did little things to make itself interactive and cinematic. The mirror is the best example, but even just a simple camera pan is driven forward by players' input. As for the story it tells, well, it mostly seemed to be centered around an estranged family, estranged due to an accident, I wager. The dinosaur imagery made me think of a young kid, maybe like a son or a brother. Wager whatever happened, our protagonist carries the weight of blame, manifesting as the dark entity in the car. Unclear where it would have all gone, but What was there is neat, and I'm glad they uploaded it in spite of it being half-baked. The Knife Sharpener by Puko. Sometimes you gotta ride around town, whistle a flute, and sharpen some knives. Story about a man in a dying industry just going about his day. There's some mentions on how knife sharpeners are outdated and you might be the last one. The sharpening minigame is usually fine. Sometimes the random chance of where it would pull would make it difficult. There's not really a clear escalation of difficulty, it's just random seeming. Not sure what kind of timer the flute noise was on. Sometimes it'd go off when pressed, and sometimes you had to wait. The idea of sharpening a knife as a metaphor for healing is neat. That you're going around healing folk, but until the end of this game, you never stopped and sharpened your own knife. The game is pleasant, I enjoyed it. Glad it was long as it was. The city is procedurally generated, I believe, and never changes. It's just block after block. The only stimulation is the customers. It's very seldom that a game knows when to stop. And that's the Haunted PS1 David Lynch jam. While not every game managed to hit that Lynchian tone, sometimes it's achievement enough to simply ship something playable. Plus, what makes something Lynchian is as subjective as art itself. I hope everyone who participated learned something neat during their development that they'll carry forward to their next project. Perhaps I'll see you on the next HPS1 jam. Speaking of, we're aiming to hold the next jam over the summer, so keep an eye out for more info in the Haunted PS1 server. Until then, keep creating.